3 million Department of Justice documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein were released today, and what they reveal has immediately shaken Washington, reignited outrage among survivors, and raised urgent questions about what the federal government is still hiding, because despite repeated assurances of transparency, this release appears to confirm that the public is seeing only part of the picture, not the full truth, as officials acknowledged collecting roughly 6 million Epstein-related documents but chose to disclose only half, a decision that legal experts and victims' advocates are already calling deeply suspicious, especially given what is already visible inside the material that was made public, including internal Epstein emails, witness statements, and FBI interview summaries that reference some of the most powerful political and business figures in the world, among them Donald Trump, senior members of his political orbit, major corporate leaders and individuals currently holding or nominated for high federal office, all emerging from a release the DOJ briefly removed from its own website after journalists flagged its contents, a move that has only intensified allegations of suppression and selective disclosure. According to the documents, Epstein was actively coordinating public messaging with advisors regarding Donald Trump as early as 2016, with emails discussing how Trump should respond if questioned about Epstein publicly, language that suggests not casual acquaintance but strategic concern, and in another email, Epstein references an allegation involving an underage girl claiming sexual contact with Trump at Epstein's residence in the early 1990s, a claim that remains unproven and unadjudicated but nonetheless appears in unsealed federal material released by the government itself, material that prosecutors later attempted to quietly remove, prompting critics to ask why such sensitive allegations were released at all if they were truly irrelevant, and why, once released, they were nearly erased. The files also contain FBI 302 interview reports, formal federal records summarizing witness testimony, including a survivor's account describing how Ghislaine Maxwell allegedly presented her to Donald Trump as available at a New York gathering, detailing how she was coached on appearance, introduced in a structured manner, and later invited to Mar-a-Lago with Epstein and Maxwell present. Language that mirrors patterns described in other Epstein-related prosecutions and testimony. Though no charges stem from this specific report, its presence in federal records has renewed calls for a comprehensive and independent review of all Epstein evidence. Further complicating matters, emails released today contradict previous public statements from senior Trump allies, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who has said he cut off contact with Epstein years earlier, yet newly released correspondence discusses logistics surrounding visits to Epstein's private island in 2012, well after Lutnick claimed ties had ended, while other documents reference travel coordination involving Elon Musk, including discussions of potential visits to Epstein's island, alongside internal Epstein notes and messages referencing Bill Gates in deeply disturbing and unverified contexts, claims that Gates has not publicly addressed in response to today's release. And notably, the name of Trump's current nominee for chairman of the Federal Reserve appears in Epstein-related emails, an appearance that has already sparked concern on Capitol Hill about vetting processes and undisclosed associations. Beyond the names themselves, perhaps the most alarming aspect of today's release is what is missing. Because despite years of reporting, litigation, and sworn testimony suggesting the existence of photos, videos, audio recordings, and internal investigative memoranda, none of that material appears in the disclosed files, a fact DOJ officials attempted to downplay during a press briefing in which they insisted there is no secret list, no protected individuals, and no evidence being deliberately withheld, claims that survivors and their attorneys openly reject, especially after the release exposed victims' identities through insufficient redaction, prompting survivor advocates to accuse the DOJ of re-traumatizing those it claims to protect, with one attorney stating publicly that such failures could not reasonably be considered accidental. The DOJ maintains that the unreleased 3 million documents are non-responsive or irrelevant, yet critics argue that relevance cannot be credibly determined by the same institutions whose past decisions enabled Epstein to receive a lenient plea deal and extraordinary privileges, a history that continues to undermine public trust, particularly as today's release shows Epstein communicating with political operatives, financiers, and foreign-linked figures well into the 2010s. Contradicting earlier narratives that portrayed his influence as fading after his first conviction. At today's press conference, DOJ leadership denied coordination with the White House on document redactions, while simultaneously acknowledging communication regarding the timing of the release, a distinction legal analysts describe as narrow and unconvincing, especially given the brief disappearance of key documents from the DOJ website after public scrutiny intensified, a digital trail that critics say speaks louder than any verbal assurance. Survivors, meanwhile, have been unequivocal, stating that transparency cannot exist without the full record, that selective disclosure benefits the powerful while leaving victims exposed, and that withholding half of the archive while releasing unredacted survivor information represents a reversal of justice rather than its fulfillment. And as pressure mounts from Congress, advocacy groups, and international observers, the central question remains unresolved and increasingly unavoidable. If the material released today already contains allegations, contradictions, and federal records implicating some of the most influential figures in modern politics and finance, then what exactly lies within the remaining 3 million documents that the public is not allowed to see, and who ultimately decides whether those truths ever come to light?